And we're live share, Kenny.
Thank you, Dina. And good morning, Wasaga Beach. Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, Deputy Bray. Good morning, councilors. And good morning, all staff and everybody's in the meeting. Today is my pleasure to call to order the Wasaga Beach Coordinated Committee on Thursday, November 18th, 2021. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. I do see one here. I was notified of one, and that's Deputy Mayor Bray for general governance, 6.6.5 accounts. And please, if as the meeting goes on, you discover you do have a pecuniary interest, let the chair at the time know. We're going to enter into community services section. 3.1, deputations, presentation, petitions, and public meetings. We do have two on board public meetings, and I believe at this time I should be turning over the chair to Councillor Foster to conduct the public meeting because I think it falls within his realm. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mark. Is that mine that's making the feedback? No?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay. How's that?
Much better.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Mark. And we've got two public meetings, as I said. Before we get into the presentation, which is already up on the screen in front of me, I will read what I'm supposed to read. So the notice of a public meeting was published in the Wasaga Sun newspaper on October 28th, 2021, as prescribed in the Planning Act. This provided 20 days of notice for the public meeting, and this meeting is therefore properly constituted as required by the Planning Act. The purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would amend the current definition of restaurant to clarify that the sale of alcohol is permitted for land uses defined as a restaurant in accordance with the applicable provincial legislation. As a result of the circulation of the notice of public meeting, the following written comments were received. Letters of support, none. Letters of no objection, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Letters of concern, none. Letters of objection, none. Mr. Ellis, have we received any further letters or correspondence in regard to this application? Matt? I'm getting a deafening silence. I will assume that's a no.
Oh, sorry. No, Councillor Foster, no. We no further comments received.
Thank you very much. Okay, the town planning staff will now make a brief presentation and will provide further details with respect to the proposed official plan amendment. I'll pass it back to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Good morning, Your Worship, Mayor Folksy, members of council, and our deputations, as well as anybody streaming into our live webcast this morning. As Chair Foster mentioned, today's public meeting is for zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 2021-78, to clarify the definition of a restaurant. The purpose of the proposed bylaw is it's a minor housekeeping amendment. It's to modernize the definitions of restaurant to reflect currently accepted norms and practices regarding the sale of alcohol in eating establishments. Clarify that restaurants licensed by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, AGCO, are permitted to sell and serve alcohol where permitted in the zoning bylaw in the town of Wasaga Beach, and to eliminate uncertainty in the sale of alcohol at eating establishments as per the zoning bylaw. Today's public meeting is a requirement under the Planning Act for proposed zoning bylaw amendments. Town staff are introducing this bylaw today to council and the general public to provide an opportunity for sharing written comments and making oral submissions to coordinated committee of council. Our current bylaw definitions, and this is where the uncertainty lies in our current zoning bylaw, is a restaurant is defined as a building or part of a building or associated outdoor cafe area which may include seating where food is offered for sale or sold to the public for immediate consumption therein. And this definition does not include a boarding house. Tavern is defined as a building or part thereof used as a lounge or other public house as defined pursuant to the Liquor License Act as amended. I'll just go back here. The fact that tavern includes this wording as per the Liquor License Act, but the definition for restaurant does not. That's essentially where the problem is in our current zoning bylaw. Currently, not all zones in the zoning bylaw that include restaurants as a permitted use also include taverns as a permitted use. So the table to the right here, green, as green means go, is where restaurants are permitted and where taverns are permitted, but taverns are not permitted in here. So because taverns allow for the sale of alcohol, then they're permitted in these zones, but because they're not permitted in these zones, technically restaurants in these right here are not actually permitted to serve alcohol in the zoning bylaw, although they do, but they're really not permitted. This is an outdated approach that harkens back to earlier times where taverns, establishments that serve alcohol were restricted only to certain areas in town. This was typical for resource-centric mining towns, to direct workers who went to the pub after work, from families attending more traditional and quieter sit-down restaurants that only served food and non-alcoholic beverages. Over the following decades, general society has collectively adopted a more liberal approach towards alcohol, to the point now where businesses of more traditional restaurants, except for fast food establishments, are pretty much expected to be licensed to serve alcohol to remain competitive in the local marketplace. So this proposed zoning bylaw amendment intends to redefine the definition of restaurant to include the sale of alcohol in compliance with the Liquor Control Act. So pretty much all we're doing is just adding this red text right here to possibly include the sale of alcohol. So if a restaurant does intend to serve alcohol, then obviously they need to do that in accordance with the Liquor Control Act. And so both taverns and restaurants would be able to serve alcohol. I do clarify that this definition only applies to restaurant. It does not apply to restaurant convenience, being fast food restaurants or restaurant takeout. So there would be no serving alcohol through a drive-through window or anything like that. This is only permitted at a regular sit-down type restaurant. Public notice was published in a newspaper on October 28th, as well as on the town website to provide 20 days of notice as per the Planning Act. No comments were received as of this morning's meeting. And as I said, this public meeting is required as per the Planning Act. And we are presenting this proposed bylaw amendment to solicit public comments. And after today's meeting, we will take any comments received. into account when preparing the final bylaw and our recommendation report to committee in December. Next steps is we're right here in the amber circle. Then, well, we're right here, public meeting, and then we'll quickly move on to the next circle. And then the next step would be council decision. And if council chooses to pass this bylaw, then we'll be at the end where we just simply publish a notice of passing in the newspaper. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
All right.
I'm open to any comments or suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll go back to the script. And I do have a question for perhaps the clerk. After this next paragraph I'm reading, it does suggest that there's a person speaking. It's the same sentence that's in the next. So I'm not sure if this person wants to speak at both of these presentations, Madam Clerk. Anyway, you can let me know once I've read this paragraph. As requested in the notice of public meeting as of 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 16th, 0 residents have registered in advance to make an oral submission at today's virtual public meeting. Madam Clerk, is Rose going to be speaking at this one, or is that a typo?
Typo, the next one.
Thank
There's
you very
nobody signed up for this one.
Okay. Okay, so there is nobody signed up. I will therefore ask members of the committee if they have any questions or comments regarding the proposed development. And I see Councillor Kinney. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Foster. And this is to Matt. I'm glad that staff has identified a historical hole in our bylaw, if I can use that term. I'm just wondering, when we apply in the factor of under the Liquor License Act, that would suggest that, heaven's sakes, if we go back into another pandemic aspect where our fine restaurants can't serve in-house, but they can use and do takeout. I believe there was a caveat through the Ford government to allow them to also deliver with the meal alcohol. Because we put the Liquor License Act in that, that would still allow them to do it if the provincial government dictated that they were allowed to do that. Does that make any sense, Matt?
Thank you. Through Chair Foster, yes. Yeah, that totally makes sense. This bylaw wouldn't affect any provincial legislation. It's just basically pretty much says, in accordance with whatever provincial legislation there is, alcohol needs to be served in compliance with that. And we just add that clarification just to ensure that alcohol doesn't run contrary to those acts and regulations, as well as for consistency, because the tavern definition includes that wording. So for clarification, we just also added that to the restaurant definition.
Thank you, Matt, and that's great. And thank you, Chair Foster.
Okay, is there anything else? Okay, seeing none. Comments received today will be considered, and staff will prepare a report back to council to summarize comments received and provide further recommendations at a future meeting. Anyone receiving notice of the public meeting will receive a notice of the decision of council in this matter. If you did not receive the notice and you'd like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planning department to leave your name and address to be added to the circulation list, or make a written request to the clerk or the town of Wasaga Beach. That being said, I will call this public meeting over. If I had a gavel, I would be gaveling. All right, let's go to number 2. This is the official plan amendment on OPA 0421 streamlined lift hold process. And here we go. So the notice of public meeting was published in the Wasaga Sun newspaper on October 28th, 2021, posted to the town website and circulated to agencies, service providers, and school boards as prescribed in the Planning Act. This provided 20 days of notice for the public meeting, and this meeting is therefore properly constituted as required by the Planning Act. The purpose and effect of the proposed official plan amendment is to streamline the process to remove a holding H symbol in accordance with the Planning Act as amended. As a result of the circulation of notice of public meeting, the following written comments were received. Letters of support, 1. Letters of no objection, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Letters of concern, none. And letters of objection, 4. Mr. Ellis, have we received any further letters or correspondence in regard to this application?
Through Chair Foster, no further comments received.
Thank you very much. Okay, town staff will now make a brief presentation and will provide further details with respect to the proposed official plan amendment. Mr. Ellis.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Our second public meeting is for OPA 0421. This official plan amendment would streamline the lift hold process. This is a minor official plan amendment in comparison to other official plan amendments. This is pretty minor. As mentioned, this would streamline the process to lift the hold provision as per the zoning bylaw, and would facilitate quicker timelines and allow development to commence construction sooner, and thus hire subtrade sooner, and get people in homes a little bit sooner as well. Today's public meeting is required under the Planning Act for official plan amendments. Town staff are introducing this proposed amendment to council and the general public for input, and provide an opportunity for sharing of written comments and making oral submissions to a coordinated committee of council. The purpose of holding zones or holding provisions in the zone bylaw. Yes,
Matt, excuse me for interrupting. You've kind of gone through the preamble. Could you throw the actual presentation up on the screen?
Oh,
As much as we like to see you, I think the public would like to see your notes as well. Thank you.
like the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, the one that's.
I thought I am sharing my PowerPoint.
No, we're seeing you.
Oh, okay.
That's
Sorry.
a bad thing. I'm not passing judgment. I'm just. There we go. That's better. Thank you.
Sorry, I stopped to share and I forgot to share it again. So I'll continue on. Holding zones are an instrument utilized to place a hold on development, to ensure orderly staging of development, ensure sufficient infrastructure and community services are available, such as water and sewer, things like that. Adopt measures that mitigate negative impacts, such as fencing or landscaping, to satisfy certain official plan policies, achieve an exchange of certain facilities, services, and other matters as part of the associated approval process, and ensure the execution of legal agreements, such as subdivision agreements or site plan agreements, and approval of necessary studies, such as a traffic impact study that needs to be submitted, or an environmental impact study. Holding zones are really just an extra measure to ensure that all those boxes are checked before a building permit is issued. So the building department, if they see a holding zone or an H symbol on the zoning of a property, then is essentially just an extra measure to ensure that they communicate to the planning department and say, well, wait a minute, that holding zone applies. So we can't issue a building permit right now, and we can't until that H is lifted. So that's pretty much all it is. Where a holding zone is used, an H suffix or symbol is added to the parcels or respective zone of the zoning bylaw. So I use an example here. These properties are where the H symbol is applied. So these properties have a hold. And the zoning is determined, of course, when the zoning bylaw is passed. So all these properties are zoned at that time, but because they are not open up to development, then the H symbol applies to all of these. When all those boxes are checked, as indicated previously, then the H symbol gets lifted. And then in comparison, these properties do not have H symbols. So these properties are either ready to be developed or already developed. The process for passing a zoning bylaw amendment to lift an H provision is given in Section 34 of the Planning Act. The ability to pass certain bylaws, the ability to pass any zoning bylaw amendment is given in Section 34 of the Planning Act. However, certain bylaws are clarified in later sections of the Act. Hold bylaws are clarified in Section 36. When the conditions are met to lift an H provision, the landowner applies, and for this process, we refer to this process as a lifthold bylaw. An example of this, as indicated in my previous slide, would be to go from an R1H zone to an R1 zone or CSH zone to a CS zone or whatever, what have you. There is no avenue to appeal a lifthold bylaw. The exception to that being the landowner or agent of the landowner may appeal where council refuses to pass the lifthold bylaw or refuses to make a decision to pass that lifthold bylaw within 90 days of the application. That's stipulated in the Planning Act, Section 36, Subsection 3. The notice of intention to pass a lifthold bylaw is published in the newspaper. There is no time limit to publish in the newspaper, such as for other bylaws that state the notice needs to run for 20 days. As long as that notice is reasonable, then it's deemed to meet the requirement. That's clarified in Section 8 of this Ontario regulation here, 545/06. The notice of passing the lifthold bylaw is only required to be given to the property owner or their agent, and that's for these sections stipulated here. The intent of the Planning Act provisions regarding the lifthold process is that by the time a development comes to that process to lift the hold provision, all the public meetings and everything have already been held. Public input has already been solicited at the previous public hearing. So, for example, if a subdivision requires a rezoning to go from R1 to R3 or whatever, or requires an official plan amendment, etc., those public meetings are already held. Any surrounding property owners have already provided their input. Planning staff has responded. It's already gone through the public process. So the Planning Act, from that perspective, says that requiring another public process as per the other processes would simply be redundant. So that's why we just need to provide notice, say we intend to lift the hold provision, and then lift it, and is pretty much that's pretty much done. Prior to passing a bylaw to remove the hold provision, council shall ensure that the owner has satisfied all the requirements of the town. And of course, planning staff is the we're the authority to do that, and as well as enters into any necessary agreements to that effect. When the H symbol is removed, the Planning Act, as amended, that allow for an appeal of an interested party, as I stated, do not apply. Notice of council's intention is, as mentioned, is just simply given in the newspaper. So our official plan amendment that we are presenting today, as mentioned, is pretty simple, and all it would do would just take out this part here, because right now our official plan states that although we don't need to advertise for 20 days as per the Planning Act, our official plan requires advertising for 20 days, and we see that as a unnecessary impediment to development. This amendment is an interim amendment. As we know, the new official plan is currently in development. However, completion of that official plan would not happen until June of next year. So this official plan amendment is just a measure to clean this up and facilitate development in a somewhat quicker fashion, because this amendment simply cannot wait until next June. In preparing this official plan amendment, we did research other municipalities that are similar to Wasaga Beach in both population and character. Those municipalities being Bracebridge, Collingwood, Innisfil, and Niagara Falls. All these municipalities have similar provisions that are pretty much silent on the requirement, pretty much silent on any time limit that notice needs to be published in a newspaper for. They just simply state as per whatever Planning Act provisions apply, and that's pretty much it. So pretty much whatever is allowed to occur as per provincial legislation is what happens. This official plan amendment is consistent with the aim of More Homes and More Choices Act, Bill 108, that was passed in 2019, in the vein of increasing supply of homes and facilitating that development process a little bit sooner. Is consistent with the provincial policy statement, or the PPS. In section 1, this section right here really just speaks to communities' economic readiness. So this official plan amendment, by taking out that 20 days notice period, would increase the town's economic readiness or development readiness. So it would be consistent with the PPS. Is consistent with the Simcoe County official plan, and is also consistent with the proposed Supporting People and Businesses Act, Bill 13, which is an item on the in a later section of today's committee agenda. If the official plan amendment is adopted, planning staff would still ensure that all the requirements are met before an H symbol is removed. As mentioned previously, advertisement in the newspaper will still happen. It just won't happen as per the 20 days, but it will still happen. Staff will still report to council accordingly to inform council that a lifthold bylaw is intended to be passed. As mentioned, we're taking away that 20-day notice period, and so everything would still happen with the appropriate accountability and transparency measures included. Public notice of today's public meeting was issued in the newspaper, Wasaga Sun, on October 28th and posted on the town's website. We have received 4 letters of opposition. The letters essentially focused on the lifting of an H symbol in regards to short-term accommodations. No external comments were received from external commenting agencies, actually with the exception of the Ojibwe, Asagi and Ojibwe Nation. So concluding remarks, as mentioned, this public meeting is required as per the Planning Act, and staff will provide a recommendation report to coordinating committee in December in consideration of any comments received today. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one more slide. Next steps are we're here in the amber circle, and then we're also here, and then so next steps after this would be the council decision, and then simply notice of decision of this official plan amendment being adopted by council if council does choose to adopt this amendment. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There we are. We're back to full screen now. Okay. Thank you for that presentation as requested in the notice. Yeah, that's right. As requested in the notice of the public meeting, as of 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 16th, 2 residents have registered in advance to make oral submission at today's virtual public meeting. The town will now open the public meeting to hear comments from the public. I'll pass it over to our clerk there. I believe Rose D'Angelo is first, but you can open up her. Anyway, take it over, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair Foster. That's correct. Rosalba, there you are. And you can unmute yourself, and you can certainly make your comments to council at this point.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Am I doing my deputation, or am I addressing the H hold symbol provisions?
This is just comments on the public meeting for the H hold. Your deputation would be as a separate, it'll be separate after the public meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. And if there's anybody else listening, staff, thank you very much for your presentation, and council members, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. So I'm referencing to the file number 0P04-21, notice to residents, the official plan amendment. My name is Rosalba D'Angelo, and I am opposed to the proposed amendment that would modify policies regarding the process for removing a holding H symbol from all properties pertaining to existing buildings in commercial tourist zones and all other zones across Wasaga Beach. We have single residential dwelling units located in commercial tourist zone operating as an intense commercialized short-term rental or Airbnb, where there has not been an appropriate development agreement or an application for a zoning bylaw amendment to lift the H holding designation from the lands so that they may be developed or transitioned from a cottage or a traditional single family dwelling unit to a commercial tourist use. There has not been any planning for development of STRs, Airbnbs, which is needed to determine the conditions that must be satisfied to remove the H symbol and to clarify the procedures to follow, including but not limited to public surveys, traffic impact assessments, planning surveys for existing buildings and structures, which includes building size and location and or site control plan. This also includes the condition to have a registration on title of Section 37 agreement per the Planning Act upon application by the landowner. The following condition of an updated functional servicing report establishing that there is sufficient capacity for water and or sanitary sewer to service the subject lands and to discuss any downstream constraints within the sanitary sewer systems. Other conditions include adequacy of vehicular access, water supply, sewage disposal to subject land use, and allowable parking spaces with an H holding symbol. Hello?
You're still here, Rose.
Yeah, you're still there. Sorry.
I'm sorry, somebody blanked out. I apologize. There must be safe and easy access for pedestrians and vehicles, parking requirements, and number of people allowed. This ensures nearby properties are protected from incompatible development, preventing dangerous land uses for STRs, Airbnbs in existing buildings and structures. A single detached dwelling unit must comply with the provisions of the official plan, Section 4, even though the subject land is in a commercial tourist zone that is legally described as a dwelling unit. Subject lands with holding provisions in Wasaga Beach are applied in order to achieve orderly staging of development to ensure adequate infrastructure and community services and facilities are available, and to adopt measure to mitigate negative impacts, to satisfy policies of the official plan, and to ensure the execution of legal agreements or approval of necessary studies, public surveys, and public consultation about subject land use. Last page. Land use with existing buildings and structures must include Committee of Adjustment decision for consent applications with public studies, surveys, assessments, and all supporting documentation for its proposed land use. Meeting community standards means any subject land with H holding provisions, commercial or residential, must apply for a zoning bylaw amendment or a rezoning in order to consider a change where a new use is allowed by the official plan. The process would avoid any land planning appeal tribunal implications that would cost taxpayers the due process of law that would be required for an appeal. These are the reasons I oppose the lifting of H hold on all subject lands in Wasaga Beach. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. As you know, planning staff will take all the comments and bring back recommendation to council. So I will then pass it back to the clerk, please, for the second speaker.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Rose, if I can get you to mute yourself and turn your video off, perfect. And now we have Pino Sibio. If you could turn on your video and your microphone, please, Pino. Thank you. There he is.
Hello, I'm not sure my comments particularly relate to the H holding, but I had comments regarding bylaw enforcement, regarding noise, properties that overextend what they are allowed to do. Is this the appropriate time for that?
We're here to discuss the proposal that's in front of us. So if you have a concern with bylaw, noise, etc., you can put in to do a delegation, but we can't. We have to deal with what's on the table at the moment. So
I understand. That's why as this progressed, I didn't know if this was the appropriate place. I was told that I would be able to speak, and I'm not clear on the formalities of your meeting.
Okay. If it has to do with the removal of the H symbol that we have in front of us today, that's great, and we'd love to hear your comments. We absolutely do. If it's on an unrelated matter, well, you can go to the clerk and arrange to get on there, and or if a similar item comes up on our council meeting, there is a comment and question period there where you can address anything that happens to be on the agenda that day. So perhaps the clerk can provide us a little direction on this.
Certainly, Chair. Yes, I'm sorry, I haven't spoken to Mr. Sibio, and I was just given his name as signing up for this particular meeting to talk about the public meeting. But he can certainly give me a shout, a call, or an email, and I'll help him through the process of what he's looking to do.
Yeah, my presentation was a part of Rose's, but again, I don't believe it has particularly to do with the removal of the H process.
All right. If you wouldn't mind, sir, if you can just contact the clerk after this, and we'll find an appropriate vehicle for you to speak, because we do want to hear. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, is there anybody else?
No, that's it for the public meeting.
Thank you. I'll go into this for a moment. I'll therefore ask members of committee if they have any questions or comments regarding the proposed development. Before I open it up completely to the floor, a couple things I want to just make sure are clear from the presentation. And Matt, I think you're still here. Yeah, you are. On page 5, the diagram you put up was just an example. It's not that those things that are highlighted with the yellow marker are going to immediately be, the H is going to be immediately removed on those. I want to make sure that that was just an example before things get construed that we're removing the H's all over town.
Correct, Chair Foster. Yes, that's just an example.
Okay, excellent. And then the other part, and this might address some of the comments that were made by Ms. D'Angelo there, is on both page 7 and page 6 and page 12. You have the comments, let me find it, when conditions are met. So this isn't just we're going to remove the H. There is a series of conditions for every development that have to be met in order. For it's not just random. You guys are sitting up in planning and say, hey, let's get the H out of there. It's going to be, there are specific conditions that have to be met for every proposed development. Correct?
Correct, Chair Foster. Yes, that's correct. It will still ensure that all conditions for that development are met.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll now open it up to the rest of the council if anyone has a comment. Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I had number of conversations with our Director of Planning, Doug Heron, just to get some clarification because some residents with concern had spoke to me, and maybe Matt could speak to it, but there is some confusion, I believe, on permitted use as opposed to a permitted design change. So to give an example is in the official plan, if we change zoning and go through the public process to change zoning on a particular part of town, whether it be an intensification node, whether it be tourism, commercial, or whatever, after that process is done, that permitted use is then approved. And the permitted use is not directly tied to the hold H. The hold H is if, in my understanding with Doug, is that if someone wanted to, say, intensify or build an addition to a property to allow more rental space or whatever, there would be a whole series of requirements to go through. What I'm a little still confused about is when we do that zoning change, and let's use the example of a cottage or a residential cottage that now can be tourism commercial, they would still have to apply for a license and go through inspection and all of those kind of things that I'm assuming would have already occurred if someone is in fact renting out their location. And I guess to further complicate it is in talking to Doug Heron, is not all municipalities deal with the hold H in the same way. So for instance, you could change zoning and put a hold H on all the properties within that changed zone, which we have done in some cases, but another municipality may choose to do that differently. Neither is right or wrong. It's just you're allowed some flexibility as how you handle hold H. So I guess at the end of this is in talking to our Director of Planning, I am confident that this suggested change in no way impacts the public's ability to, I guess, to object. It's just, it happened earlier in the process. So if I'm correct on that, or if you want to speak to it further, that would be great. Thank you.
You are, and I'll turn it over to Doug. He looks like he's got something. Doug?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you, and in response to Councillor Belanger's comments, I'll take it from the big authority that were provided under the Act and try to narrow it down to the topic of what's before us today in terms of process for Lifthold. Under the Act, we have authority to do three things: to address use of lands or change of use through lands, and that's one item. We can address how lands are designed, and that's where you get into the site plan control. Or we have the ability to create new lands, and usually that's through consent or plan of subdivision. So really we have three authorities to do three actions. The Lifthold typically applies to the second one, where it's we're looking at the actual design of the lands. And currently, to narrow down what we're dealing with today, we would only lift a hold once we have some form of development with the land agreement with the landowner. And it could be a site plan control agreement, it could be a subdivision agreement, or some other form of agreement. But basically the town wants to be satisfied that the lands will be developed in a way that functions well and is safe for the public. And in this case, what we're dealing with today is the process of lifting the hold. Currently, our process is somewhat onerous. It adds extra time, and time basically leads towards extra cost to the landowner. And typically, we think of the landowners as being big developers, but this applies to small property landowners as well and small business owners. So in bringing forward this change to our official plan to try to streamline the lift-hold process, what we're looking to is trying to make it more efficient and less costly for people who own land who want to make improvements to their land. So I hope that quick synopsis of how this process works is helpful, and I'll take questions as well.
Councillor Belanger, is that okay for you? Thank you. Okay, and again, we know that at the provincial level, there's a push by the Premier at this point to try and speed the process along. So this is just kind of matching us to the provincial guidelines a little better. Okay. If there's nothing else, comments received today will be considered, and staff will prepare a report back to council to summarize the comments received and to provide further recommendation at a future meeting. Anyone receiving notice of the public meeting will receive a notice of the decision of council in this matter. If you did not receive the notice and would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planning department to leave your name and address to be added to the circulation list, or make a written request to the clerk of the town of Wasaga Beach. If there's nothing else, I'll call the second public meeting adjourned. And there's my gavel. Okay, the next, and I don't have a script for this, Madam Clerk, who's...
Correct. This is a delegation.
Okay, so it's going back to Councillor Kinney.
Back? Yes.
I will pass. Here's the chair back to you, Councillor Kinney. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And we're going to move down to 3.1.3, a presentation by Ms. Rose Delangio, requesting zone amendment to eliminate short-term rentals. I'll go to the clerk as I believe Rose is here, but I'll go through you, please. And Rose.
Thank you, Chair McKinney. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. And whoever else is listening on board. So my deputation will propose amending the official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw and implementing a licensing regime and a plan for restrictive enforcement measures to ensure the town's interests are protected in any future developments where short-term rentals are concerned. STR's Airbnb's epidemic is the impetus that contravenes zoning bylaws and municipal bylaws, with multiple occurrences where current bylaw enforcement strategies has not deterred bad conduct of operators and or guests. If the matter or intensification of STRs are permitted in certain zones, then public discussion and public consultation needs to be urgently addressed to ensure accountability and transparency so that STRs are properly regulated in Wasaga Beach. Wasaga Beach has no proposed oversight of controlling the number of STRs that cause nuisances and disruptions in neighborhoods where appropriate balanced measures are supported by provincial policies that speak to the orderly development of safe, livable, healthy communities. These STRs can cause traumatic events for those neighbors who live next door to one ghost hotel. The town of Wasaga Beach has no mandate to protect the safety and security of neighborhoods from illegal STRs, Airbnbs, which has attracted egregious conditions of violent acts, drug trafficking, gang-related activity, and improper commercial activity. If we want to sustain healthy, family-oriented tourist zones, we must eliminate illegal ghost hotels where a property is being used in a manner or intensity that is akin to a hotel or banquet hall. I ask council to consider an interim control bylaw until a compatible framework is planned for, number one, zoning bylaw amendments to prevent illegal ghost hotels. Number two, adopting proactive restrictive enforcement measures with a new system of fines for hosts and guests who violate them. And number three, adopting a new short-term rental licensing bylaw with how and where STRs are able to operate, including town and provincial licenses that are now required under new provincial policy. I am requesting that no more Airbnb licenses be issued at this time until the approval of necessary studies are applied. I ask Council to pass a resolution to adopt a strict enforcement strategy to support a matter or intensification mandate of STRs in non-intensification zones, including a limit on how many Airbnbs are allowed, capping the number of licenses issued. We need zero tolerance mandate for irresponsible STR operators who are engaging in bad conduct with no punitive consequences in order to ensure safety and enjoyment of our properties and neighborhoods. While hotels are subject to certain standards such as cleanliness and safety, private homes are not subjected to the same scrutiny, therefore flying under the radar where operators circumvent all rules and regulations for safe residential neighborhoods. Wasaga Beach residents have raised concerns about safety issues such as fire safety and coordinating proper mandatory inspections and requirements among ministries of health and safety, zoning, building, fire code, property standards regulations, and providing a list detailing the number of guests. These illegal STRs do not provide the $2 million in liability insurance that's required for a commercially operated short-term accommodation in a dwelling unit. This jeopardizes abutting neighbors of a nefarious risk of being denied of lack of coverage, even for the injured guests on the premises. The town of Wasaga Beach has not implemented any proactive restrictive enforcement measures where STR Airbnb guests created a severe nuisance to abutting neighbors that some residents have experienced on a daily basis, and a dwelling unit that is not the landlord's primary address. We have slumlords turning flop houses into STRs that are unsafe, undignified, and unaffordable. We want to live in a safe and protected neighborhood where tourism means family-oriented, not hoedown frat parties every weekend or a criminal destination for illegal activities at every second house in the area. Our comprehensive zoning bylaw defines establishment as a place or premises where a use occurs or events happen. Wasaga Beach needs more clarity with the definition of tourist establishment cottage rental that is being used to describe a dwelling unit operating as an intense commercial STR. This is a distinct perception of a ghost hotel transitioning from a traditional single-family dwelling unit into a full-blown commercialized STR that is both non-complying and non-conforming with no proper framework to support its use. This would be considered a distinguished commercial use activity under the Planning Act. Section 34 is sufficient to warrant differentiation from permanent residence to dedicated use for daily paying guests. Last page. Airbnb recently eliminated the event-friendly search filter and removed the option for hosts to include parties and events allowed in their platforms, where it would enable the creation of a hotspot of chaos for surrounding neighborhoods. There was a global party ban policy introduced in August of 2020 for unauthorized parties, and now authorized parties as well. We should streamline the process by creating databases for short-term rentals and licensing operators. Under new legislation, STRs will have to include their provincial license numbers on their listings on sites such as Airbnb. Under current guidelines, short-term rental operators are supposed to register with the province under the Tourism Act, as well as with the town, which comes with some levies and fees. Thank you, Sir Clerk. I appreciate that. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you for your fantastic presentation, Mr. Delangio. Right now, I'm going to open it up to council for any discussion that might happen before I call for the vote. Not seeing anyone. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Belanger, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Kenny. Yes, in this particular case, Mrs. Rose D'Angelo has spoken to me in the past, and she happens to be in an area that is zoned tourism commercial. But certainly I have been contacted by a considerable number of residents that have similar concerns, where they are in R1 zones and feel that there's homes being utilized as Airbnb, and in many cases with inadequate parking, and again with disturbances within the neighborhood. And I know this is a growing concern across all municipalities, and I do believe it is a concern that warrants councils and staff's attention to see how an appropriate level of enforcement and deterrent and proper licensing occurs. I think everyone on council is probably aware it was pretty well publicized in social media, where even some of the new R1 developments in town were being promoted during sales campaigns as being opportunities for Airbnb, even though they were R1 residential, where Airbnb is not allowed. So it is a growing concern, and I would certainly like to see it put on future business for both council and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. At this time, I'll read the resolution. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the presentation by Ms. Rose Delangio for information. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Watson and Councillor Foster. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That passes 7-0. And again, I do thank Ms. Delangio for her presentation. Thank you. Now we move on to unfinished business. We have none. Now we're into other agencies report and our fire department report. So I want to introduce our fire chief, the best fire chief in Canada. And before he starts off, I want to congratulate him for 25 years of dedicated service to the town. Thank you, Mike. And go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. Good morning, Your Worship, members of council. In the month of October, the fire department responded to 180 calls for service, bringing our 10-month total for 2021 to 1,535 calls. There weren't any noteworthy occurrences in October, but it certainly was a busy month for us as we recorded the second highest monthly call volume so far this year. Fire Prevention Week also occurred in October, which is a busy week for us, and I did report on that at our last coordinated committee meeting. We have started November off with a couple of structure fires. The first was a garage fire on Cardinal Way that occurred on November 6th. The fire was knocked down by the first arriving firefighters very quickly before involving the rest of the home. The house did sustain some smoke damage and some water damage, but will be repairable. The cause of ignition came down to two possibilities in this instance. It was possibly electrical or smoking material, but it was deemed definitely accidental and not suspicious in any way. The occupants were not home when this fire occurred. On Tuesday evening, November 9th, we responded to a very large structure fire, fully involved, and that was on Old Mosley Street. The home was undergoing renovations at the time, and the day of the fire, some contractors had been doing some hot works on the flat roof of the garage. This was ultimately determined to be the cause. The roof contractor reported following all safety measures, which involves keeping a fire watch 3 hours past stopping the hot works. However, smoldering can go on for quite some time before ignition, and we've seen this before. This fire grew rapidly as the home had no insulation or drywall or closures between the rooms, which would have limited the fire spread. A building in this state is basically like a big stack of kindling, so the fire spread rapidly. We had a scary moment at this fire when a 100-pound propane tank located in the garage exploded. It wasn't until shortly after that we realized how lucky we were when we discovered that the bottom of the tank shot through a group of us between one of our pumper trucks and the aerial truck and smashed through a fence across the road. The top part of the tank with the valve assembly landed embedded in a lawn of a neighbor four houses to the west, which we found out about on Saturday when the owner of that property called me to come and pick it up. When we were back at the fire scene the next morning, I found pieces of the garage door, parts of the roof, and various other debris spread all over the place. The debris was, all this debris was projectiles from the explosion. The odds of us and our trucks not being hit by flying debris is so low, but somehow we came out unscathed. We were able to protect the homes of the neighbors on either side, as well as the boat in one neighbor's driveway that was parked and tarped for the winter. Considering that the size of this fire was huge, the accomplishment of the firefighters to save the houses on either side, I commend them for that. It was a tough battle. Security video from the same neighbor helped us with the investigation and captured the explosion. We did speak with the OFM that night during the fire and again the next morning, and it was decided that their attendance was not required. And just on a final note, earlier this month, on the 7th, daylight savings time ended and we put our clocks back an hour. So for many years now, the fire service has leveraged the time change to serve as a reminder to change the batteries in your smoke and CO alarms. So I hope that everyone did that. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and fantastic work. I'll look towards council if there's any people. Councillor Foster, then Belanger, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Again, I want to commend the firefighting staff and the emergency crews for getting that under control as best they could and preventing damage to themselves and anyone else as much as possible. So the other part, and I did show that, held it up to the camera. One of my great things is remembering every time the clock changes to change my battery. So I do it as my reminder, and the chief took the words out of my mouth. Darn it. Anyway, good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Belanger, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Kinney. I mentioned it at the previous meeting, but I thought being the public is present, just to indicate that a resident in the area of the significant Old Mosley Street fire had contacted me and thought it would be very appropriate that I post the excellent work of the fire department in responding quickly to that fire and saving both homes on either side. And they were very appreciative and very impressed with the work of our fire department. So congratulations, Chief, and please pass on our gratitude to your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Councillor Watson, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. I would just like to reiterate the same type of comments, Chief. Living only half a block away from the fire, it was an unbelievably hot fire. Flames were 100 feet in the air, it seemed, at the time. We heard all the neighbors went out because our houses were shaken by the first explosion. There was actually a second explosion. And the comments from all the neighborhood were very impressed. When I went down the next morning and saw the houses on either side pretty much unscathed except for a bit of siding and boats and everything. You guys did one hell of a job, and very commendable to you and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Watson. And just to re-echo all the comments from council members, it just magnifies and emphasizes the factor that we have a great fire department in town, and it's a dangerous job because, as you said, Chief, that projectile, which was a propane tank, could have hit any one of our members, could have caused massive injuries, and we as a community were lucky that that did not happen. So any more comments before I read the resolution? Not seeing any. Thank you again, Chief. Resolve that the Community Services section of the Coordinated Committee received the October 2021 Fire Department report for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Wells, Councillor Belanger. And calling vote, all in favor? That would be unanimous, 0-7. Okay, now we're going to move down to the consent agenda 3.4. I see that three items have been pulled. They would be 3.5.2, 3.5.4, and 3.5.6. And if I missed something, council, please let me know. And if not, I will read the resolution except those items already pulled. Resolved that the Community Service section of the Coordinated Committee hereby receive the November 18th, 2021 consent agenda 3.4 through 3.6 and all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding previously pulled agenda items from the motion and voted on separately. Could I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Belanger and Deputy Mayor Bray. Calling the vote for that. All in favor? Thank you. That would be 7-0 and unanimous. Now we'll move down to 3.5.2, and I believe Councillor Belanger pulled that, and so please go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Kinney. Yes, first of all, I just want to say that certainly I support the discounts that are suggested, and a 75% discount is considerable. And I think we do need to be consistent in our support, which we have been doing for a number of requests. With that said, the report does indicate that this particular organization still has some financial challenges. And we know through COVID that fundraising has been very difficult, especially with the youth groups. We certainly don't want to put anyone in harm's way. But it does indicate that they could apply for a community grant. And I was wondering through our CAO if he could just update the community as to the timing of when the grants for 2022 can be applied for. And if there's, again, depending on how many community grants we receive, whether there could be a consideration to look at whether or not we have to look at a little more financial support given the second year of COVID and the impact that's had on our community. So if that's okay, George, if you could just give a brief update as to when a grant could be applied for and when it might be received for 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the community grant program is administered through the Treasury Department. Typically, there is a notice that goes out around this time of year. I'm not familiar with the deadline for the application for that grant program. That is when council deals with the bulk of the applications. However, applications do trickle in other times of the year. I'm not sure if there is somebody from Treasury that could respond, or from Recreation, Events and Facilities with respect to the specific deadline. I don't know that off the top of my head. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Wancourt, and I see Chris Roos there, but Deputy Mayor Bray, would you go ahead, please?
Thank you. If we're following up with Treasury, I wonder if they would also confirm if there are any funds left for 2021. Because to get into the queue for 22, it's hard for them to make plans if a decision isn't going to be made for a number of months. But if there's leftover money in the budget from this year, then it might be a good investment in this request from the Girl Guides. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Chris, did you have something to add there?
I would only speak to the application deadline is typically February, and I believe once council has had an opportunity to approve, typically those funds would be authorized in March. Therefore, likely they'll be received by community groups in April on a traditional year.
Thank you, Chris, for that update. I'm not seeing anybody from Treasury that could respond to that. However, that being said, I'm sure our CAO can relay council's thoughts as far as the deputy mayor goes with regards to any funds left in 2021. And I'm just going to see if there's any more comments, questions from council right now. Not seeing any, so I'm going to read the motion that the coordinated committee recommend to council that the Recreation, Events and Facilities Department continue to only offer discounted facility rental fees to user groups as outlined within the indoor facility rental fee policy for community organizations. Could I get a mover and a seconder? But before we do that, Deputy Mayor, please.
So before that is moved, when I look at our budget binder, it shows that grants to organizations have about $22,000 used this year with a budget of 39. So it looks like there might be room in that budget if we were to accept a late application for 2021 grants. Just don't know whether we want to update the motion for that or just refer it back to staff for consideration. And I see the CAO's card, so I will stop talking.
Deputy Mayor, thank you, and go ahead, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just able to check the financial report as of October 31st, and I can update the Deputy Mayor's information. There's 16,000 left in the grants budget for 2021.
Thank you, and Deputy Mayor, please go ahead.
So then if we could amend this motion to consider the Girl Guides request, seeing as there is money in the budget, there would be support for that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm seeing a card from our worship. Please go ahead, please.
Thank you. I certainly support this group. I just want to make sure that by making a one-off decision on this one, that we're not going to somehow be excluding some others. So again, I don't know that staff can answer that on the fly or not, but I certainly want to make sure that we're being fair to all groups who might be in the same situation as the one that we've received the request from.
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Foster, then Councillor Belanger, please.
Thank you. And I noticed Councillor Watson, I think, had a thing as well. But yeah, further to the mayor's point, I think there's really two separate resolutions here. I think the one we have should go as is, and then the idea of using the extra money from this year for community organizations should be referred back to staff, just so we have a chance on that. So I support the original one, and I do support the deputy mayor, but I say refer it back to staff and get a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Belanger, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Kenny. Sorry, I think one of our other councillors was ahead of me, but all I wanted to know is, I know it's late in the year, but if there is money left in the budget, as maybe our Director of Recreation could just comment, can we still receive grant requests? Because if that's the case, they could just let the Girl Guides know, and they could make their request, and it would come before council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger, and I apologize to Councillor Watson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. I actually didn't have my card up. I was just supporting the Deputy Mayor's consideration of the Girl Guides and trying to make that happen. So that was really it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I have read the motion, but we haven't moved as first and second. I'm going to look at the clerk whether or not one comment, and I believe it was Councillor Belanger. If we move this now, and I don't see a reason why we can't, that we could not make sure that other organizations, including Girl Guides, know that we still have funds going forward.
Councillor, the CAO was trying to speak earlier. You're muted, Councillor.
Yeah, I hit the button far too many times. Thank you, George, and then Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Councillor Wells and Chair Kinney. Yes, I think that with respect to the motion that's on the floor, if that could be considered and disposed with, and then if I may suggest to follow up on Councillor Foster's comment that the matter of providing access to the grant program for groups that are using our facilities be referred back to staff, so that we can bring a fulsome report back in terms of how that would happen. I think it could be done fairly quickly, Mr. Chair. So that would be my suggestion to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I see our treasurer here, and I do have both Councilor Belanger and Deputy Mayor Bray. Oh, no? Okay, we're good. Could we hear something from our treasurer, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. My understanding is you're wondering about the grant program for 2021 and the remaining balance. Is that correct? And the availability of those funds for a request that's come forward. Is that correct?
That's correct, Jocelyn. And if there's any information you can update council with this time, that would be great.
So I believe that the amount of 16,000 remaining has been conveyed, and I haven't received any application from anyone further, but if something was brought forward, we could look at that then. As George has indicated, if you defer that back to staff, we can look at it again.
Thank you. And I think that is what we're after as far as, yes, we'll forward. I mean, I'm going to call first and seconder for this, and then ask staff just to look at what's available and make sure that service groups can still apply. Councillor Wells, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to be assured that in reviewing that we're looking at how it's going to be made known that these funds are available to all groups that might be applicable. I don't want to suddenly say, well, okay, now because one group made a presentation, we're now going to honor that application. And I think it was a very worthwhile application. I don't deny that, but to simply say, okay, we're going to honor that one and not have a common ground for everybody else to know that they could apply. I can't support that situation.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Councillor Wells. And I apologize, my phone rang in the background. I don't believe it's going to be focused on one. I think how I envision it is just a notification to the town that the funds for the 2021 grant program are still available, something like that. But that being said, we'll leave it in staff's hand to develop something that's fair and accurate and equal across the board in town. I've already read the motion, so unless somebody needs it read again, and I don't think so, could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Belanger and Councillor Wells. I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. That moves 7-0 unanimously. Now, moving down to 3.5.4, the seniors special events coordinators report dated November 18, 2021, re-proposed 2022 Sled Fest event. That was pulled by Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I apologize, George.
Sorry to interrupt. Just I wanted to follow up just on my comment earlier about a second motion following that initial motion with respect to referring the matter of access to the grant program for these groups back to staff for review and report to committee or council whenever we can bring it forward. We kind of moved past that, and I was just wanted to suggest that if committee wishes, they could put a motion forward, and then we would prepare a report in that regard and bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And I see a bunch coming up. I'm going to go from left to right, and I'm going to pick on Councillor Watson. Go ahead, please.
This is for the Sled Fest one, Councillor?
I
Or
did pull that one, and now I think we're referring to a separate motion with regards to moving things back to staff with regards to the grant program. So I'm going to look to the clerk right now on proper procedure. I did pull it. However, we did not call for a mover or seconder to it. Are we able to jump out of 3.5, or should we conclude 3.5 and then make a motion after that? I go to you.
Certainly, Councillor Kinney. I don't believe we've delved into that motion as of yet, so I think that you could entertain someone moving a motion at this point to allow the remaining funds of the grant program to be advertised as available for applicants. But I believe that what Mr. CAO is saying is that he would like staff to bring forward a report to that effect prior to letting, just having that done, if I'm correct, that we refer it back to staff for a report regarding the remaining funds and how that would be displayed to the community.
Thank you. I see our worship. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that we have time for that if we want to get those funds out there. My understanding of the conversation was that there was support from council members to look at that $16,000 that was left. How do we make it fair for you know, the ones that have requested it, but all other organizations as well. So personally, I would like to see that they have direction to go forward and just go and do that. Go and pull those other groups, see how we can spend that $16,000 and bring that report back. And then otherwise we're just wasting time. But that's my understanding of it.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Deputy Mayor Bray first, and then our CAO.
Thank you. So full support of what the mayor said. I do think timing is important. If we want groups to be planning for 2022, they need to be making decisions this year. So hopefully the CAO has word crafted the motion that supports what he's generally hearing us speak about. But I am full support and willing to move it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And to George, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to bring committee back. When we heard the deputation, it was a result of the school boards who have closed their facilities to after hours use due to COVID. And a number of groups, whether it's the Girl Guides, Cubs, et cetera, have been displaced from using school board facilities. So they're looking to move into municipal facilities. So we have space to accommodate, and the Director of Recreation, Events and Facilities has outlined in his report, you know, what we can do to try to accommodate. We have a number of other groups that also rent space at our various facilities as well that have been long-standing tenants that carry on. So I just, from my standpoint, to see clarification was with respect to, we're dealing with these groups that have been displaced. We're going to try to accommodate them at a reasonable rate, which is fully understandable. It's just, as was mentioned earlier, is try to be fair to everybody that has been impacted by this. And that's where trying to understand what committee's direction is. Is it to all groups? Is it groups that were displaced that are now finding themselves at the RecPlex? We just need some direction in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, George. And to her worship, please.
Hi, again, I'm taking this as being youth groups, like the one that presented to us who were going to the schools. It's not an option. Going anywhere else is too expensive. And we're just looking to use up the $16,000. So I think you just look at the youth groups that it is affecting the most. And again, I think we need to just leave it with staff to bring that back and tell us who was interested, who applied for what, and council can then approve it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Was there anybody else in council wanting to speak at this time? Because I just want to have a, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It just, if I find youth groups might be a little restrictive because there's an awful lot of physical activities that also haven't been able to participate. They may be moved outside in the good weather, but it's no longer good weather and they can't continue out there. If the money's there and the request comes through and it's reasonable because they have been displaced, I think we have been community leaders. We've worked really hard to make our facilities safe, to keep them open, to open them with the proper protocols. And we should be very proud of what we've done, and we should be willing to share it with those that maybe didn't have the resources or the forward vision to make their facilities available. So I would like to share it with community groups of all kind and not just limit it to youth. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It was Councillor Belanger, then Councillor Wells, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Kenny. I agree with the mayor and the deputy mayor, but with $16,000, the guides for the season, I believe, was just over 800. So we can accommodate almost 20 groups. I think, again, it's getting it out there and getting the applications in, and then we would treat those grant applications as we always do, look at the money available, and council would allocate the funds proportionately the way we do earlier in the season. But I would think that given the amount of money available and the groups we're targeting, that we could probably accommodate just about everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Councillor Wells, please.
Yeah, I'm not totally in agreement with the deputy mayor. I think the priority should be going to the youth groups as a priority. And at some point, if there's other funds, then other groups can apply. But to me, the groups that have been most affected from a point of view of a financial situation are the youth groups that no longer have a place to operate. So my resolve would be that that the youth groups have a priority before others groups.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Oh, sorry, Your Worship, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was just going to say somebody needs to just put a motion forward. I know the deputy mayor had said that she would move the motion. We just need somebody to put the motion out there. Somebody will second it and we can have a vote because this has gone on for quite some time.
I don't disagree. Is anybody ready to make a motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Kenny. Yes, I motion that we refer it back to staff to notify the groups identified by council of the grant money available, and that applications be received and brought forward back to council. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bray, please.
Sorry. Just wonder if it could be a little more wide open so that Treasury could advertise that there is a little bit of money left in our grant budget and organizations that perhaps could benefit from access to our facilities. I don't know that it's something we used to allow the grants to cover, but if we're kind of making that allowance for this one-time exception, then I just think we need to open it up to all the groups. You can put an emphasis on youth in the scoring if that's important to the majority of council, but I just think we need to advertise it and get a report back in December with a recommendation for where the money should go.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Her Worship.
I was just going to say I would support that. It can go back, and again, like the deputy mayor said, in the scoring, we'll determine who needs it most.
Okay, now I'm going to look to the clerk, please. Thank you. Maybe.
If I could just assist, if we just add the words to Councillor Belanger's motion, which was to notify groups and the general public, then we can get it widely spread out there and see who can apply for the funds. Councillor
muted,
Kinney, you're
Councillor.
mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Right now I've got referred back to staff and notified groups that funds are available. I don't see that being as a viable motion per se. Should we be adding more words to that, please, Madam Clerk?
Sorry about that, Councillor Kinney, and my mouse decided to stop working. I believe Councillor Boulanger, if you want to recite your motion, would you please for me so that I can hear it again?
I didn't write it down, so it may be
I did, if
slightly
you'd like
different,
to,
but
Councillor Boulanger.
Through Chair Kinney, that we refer back to staff the availability of additional funds for the 2021 grant season, and notify groups and the general public of the availability, and that the applications be brought back to before council at as early as possible, or in December, I think is what the deputy mayor said. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, would that suffice as a motion?
Yes, I think that works. If we would have a call for a seconder for that. That'd be good.
Thank you, Worship. I see Councillor Boulanger and her worship as a seconder. I will call for the vote now. All in favor? 7-1. Thank you, Council. And I'll trust that the clerk's department can put that appropriately with a number for the future. Thanks, Council, for the debate. I think it was a viable one. It was a good one, and I think it's one that was needed. But now I'm going to apologize to Councillor Watson because of his pulled one of 3.5.4. Councillor Watson, please go ahead now.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. Yes, I pulled this item. The report talks about the application being late, and there seems to be a pattern here from the applicants over the years. I think 2015 was the last one. It was 81 days instead of 90 days. But there's also a lot of talk in here about how beneficial this event has been to the community. And I've personally participated in it over the years. I've seen it, and it does. So I don't have a solution outside to see if we could somehow work with this group, maybe putting the date back. I see they want it in around January 22nd, somewhere in there. We have Family Day coming up in February. We also have Valentine's Day. Having been the chair of, we used to have a thing called Winter Am in Wasaga Beach years ago, and I was chair of it for a few years. And I remember one theme was Bring Your Sweetheart to Wasaga Beach. We had a lot of, it went over very well. And I'm just thinking if they could move the date back a bit to try and allow more time. February is our coldest month traditionally. So I think it could still work and then maybe dovetail with one of those two events, Family Day or Valentine's Day, and try and make it work in the community if we can. That's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Any other discussions on that at this time? Not seeing any, but I do believe in the report that I think staff was working or trying to work to move it forward. I see Angela up. Angela, could you do a little bit of feed update, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kinney, and thank you for your comments, Councillor Watson. I did have the discussion with the event organizer about pushing it back because of the earlier dates. I was able to convince them to move 1 week compared to what they originally were proposing. So originally they wanted earlier in January. Their schedule for other sled events is later in the season, which is why they were looking at hosting it in January, so that they wouldn't be competing with those other bigger events that are happening in the city of Barrie and a couple other places around that are that would draw the crowd that would come to Wasaga Beach would also go to those ones. I did also try and convince them to work with us for Snowman Mania, which they are interested in hosting us something smaller. Definitely a lot less of a big event, like, you know, very, very downscaled compared to what they are originally planning, if it is going to be in conjunction with Snowman Mania. And I did have the conversation with them about that I was bringing forward the report to not recommend the event this year, but working on a bigger event for 2023. So they are in support of the way that I've written the motion as well. So they are aware of it. And I do think that we can continue to work with this group for the future. I just think that with the beach the way it is and the parameters with Ontario Parks and being on the beach, there's going to be some challenges that we'd have to overcome, which would require more funding for fencing, more funding for safety procedures and precautions because of the street poles and the retaining wall and that sort of thing. So that will definitely impact if they can have the event in early January as well.
Thank you, Angela. Revisit Councillor Watson, then Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Just a follow up. Thank you, Angela, for that. It sounds like you've done the research and the homework with the group, and hopefully, well, if it's not going to happen this year, hopefully it'll happen next year. I'd really like to see it come back to the beach because I think it's a great event. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Foster, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I heard Angela correctly, to make sure it's clear and on the record that she's talked to the organizer and told them that she was bringing this report, and the organizer was actually in support of it the way it was written. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Foster, that was correct.
Thank you. That'll save a whole bunch of posting on Facebook.
Thank you, Councillor Foster, and thank you, Angela. Any other discussion on this motion before I read it? Councillor Wells, please go ahead.
Just a comment. I think Councillor Foster is dreaming if he thinks that's going to make Facebook any less active.
Thank you, Councillor Wells, for your comments. And at this time, I'm going to read the motion. That the Community Service section of the Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it directs staff not to accept the application for the proposed Sled Fest event on January 22nd and 23rd of 2022 as it is incomplete and was received late. Could I have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Foster and Councillor Wells. Call the vote. All in favor? Seeing all that moved 7-0 unanimous. All right, so there we go. Okay, now we have our third polled one, which was 3.5.6, the CAO's report dated November 18, 2021, re H2OI, unsanctioned car rally costs and policing. I believe it was Councillor Watson and Councillor Belanger. I'll just pick Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney, on this. Thank you, Mr. CAO, for bringing this report forward. There's substantial costs that the municipality incurred with this illegal event. Looks like about $46,000 at least that we are being billed or added to our OPP budget for the coming year. In spite of a number of people putting their political ambitions in front of community safety by endorsing this event, it's a big cost. And I guess my question would be, what's going to happen if they choose to come back year after year or next year with these costs? Are we still going to be on the hook year after year with them coming? Because if they just decide The report's pretty clear from the police that it's an unsanctioned event. So I'm just a little concerned going forward, but thank you for the report. It's a good report and illustrates the problems with it.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. The billing model is such that applies across the province. So if they do decide to come back, again, the OPP will be in charge and looking to protect private property, individuals, and the community at large with respect to what takes place. There will be a cost to the municipality. The only thing I would comment is that when the borders closed in 2020, the typical event takes place in the United States, and when the borders closed, people didn't have anywhere to go, so they looked at options, and Wasaga Beach was picked. They did it 2 years in a row. With the borders reopening again, it'll be a wait and see whether they return to what they used to do, is travel down to the States or come back. But at this point in time, to specifically answer your question, Councillor, if they do decide to come back, the OPP will be here, and we'll see similar breakdown, I would imagine, in cost as outlined in the report.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Councillor Belanger, please.
Thank you, Chair Kinney. Yes, I had contacted and had conversations with the CAO on a couple of occasions, and the report and the information provided was helpful, but I don't know if it totally answered my question. My concern is that as a municipality, we on a 4-year average, my understanding is we adjust our policing costs based on number of calls for service. And the calls for service are, I believe, $157 each. And although on that weekend, not all of the calls of service were to Wasaga Beach, it's now up to 488 calls, which represents about $75,000, with the biggest portion of that going into our 4-year average. However, it was indicated that not all identified calls for service are necessarily billed at 157, but it didn't indicate how many would be or would not be. And then on the other side, they were indicating the 2,400 hours of overtime, that a portion of that would be allocated to the municipality. So my question to the CAO was that the calls for service generate revenue for OPP to offset the cost of the resources applied. So I wanted some kind of clarification as to that the final number would reflect that the calls for service, at least in part, paid for a lot of the overtime that was incurred on that weekend. Further, I just wanted clarification as to what constitutes a call for service, because I felt it was highly unlikely that 488 calls for service were received by residents. And if I read the CAO's report correctly, is that additional OPP support directed by either the OPP helicopter or the OPP command center could constitute a call for service. So I just wanted to ensure that there was a balance there, that it wasn't a kind of a double dip, that we're paying for all of the overtime, paying for all the calls of service, and they're both applied. And it was unclear to me in the report as to what actually is going to be charged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. I see Her Worship's card up next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to address some of those things, we won't know until the 4-year numbers come in as to how H2OI actually affected the town. the public works cost was $46,000 or whatever's in the report there. But the reality is this cost the province, every taxpayer, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when this event happens somewhere else in the province, it's costing us here in Wasaga Beach. So these events as a whole are expensive. So a different strategy needs to be had to deal with them on a larger scale. Discussions have happened and will continue to happen between us here at the town and with the Huronia West, because I raised concern with them with our follow-up meeting that part of the strategy was keeping them all in here. So maybe next year it won't look the same, but that's a discussion that has to still be had. And obviously, when we talk strategy, it's not something that's going to be shared widely and publicly because it's a strategy, but concerns about Wasaga Beach dealing with this every year and the costs associated with it, not just here, but province-wide, are ongoing.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Foster, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, looking at the really big picture on this, there were people around town who were saying it's just kids having fun. And the bright part of this is no one was injured or severely injured or worse. So, but you go, those people are naive if they think it's just kids having fun and there's no cost to it. There's a huge cost. And as the mayor pointed out, whether it's held here or in Temiskaming, the OPP costs are shared across the province. So no matter where it is, we're still paying for this. And again, kids having fun in high-powered vehicles and perhaps, as you saw the charges, there's impaired, there's all kinds of vehicles taken off the road. We're lucky. We've been lucky 2 years that we haven't had a fatality. So if you think it's just kids having fun, you're wrong. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Any other comments before I read the motion? Not seeing any. I'll put my 2 cents in.
The CAO is asking to speak, Councillor.
Thank you again. I was moving my head around, didn't see it. Go ahead, George.
Thank you, Councillor Wells, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with respect to 2 points, with respect to the calls for service, as Councillor Belanger has indicated, those calls for service will be averaged over 4 years and factored in with province-wide calls for service. So the town's calls for service are a proportional share of the province-wide calls for service and averaged over 4 years. So we won't see the potential impact until 2023, and we won't know what the impact is of this event on 2021 until the end of the year when we get a tally of all the calls for service. And we may come in at our average, we may come in less, we may come in a little bit more, but all that gets factored in to the overall provincial calls for service. My second point is with respect to the overtime. The overtime of 2,400 hours, that is also averaged over 4 years, and a calculation is made. The reason the OPP did this was to smooth any significant events over a period of time so that the impact would be minimized. It's still an impact, but it is intended to be minimized. We won't know again until the end of this year in terms of total overtime for Wasaga Beach, and then we won't know until 2023 what the impact is as 2021 gets factored into that 4-year average. So there are costs associated with the event. I've tried to outline those in the report, but I just wanted members of the committee to be aware that the final tally we won't know until everything's totaled up at the end of the year, and then we'll see how that translates into 2023. Policing costs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, George, for that update. And I think that was very important for our community to hear. Just my 2 cents, as I said before, revolve around if there's a reoccurrence next year of this event. I'm hopeful that with the opening of the borders, or the potential opening of the borders, that our town is looked upon as not being as welcoming as other towns in the States. Not that I want to bring bad will to our neighbors to the south. However, again, we're looking at a fringe in our community that, I'm sorry, in our society that tends not to look at legal and safe operations of vehicles and or their nature, and just their want to be malicious in that community. I know as a town, we've reached out to try and make it sanctioned and they've turned it down. So the want isn't there. And so the want is not to have them come back. That being said, I'll stop my vent now. And if there is no more conversation here, I will read the motion. That the Community Service Section of the Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it receive the CAO's report on the cost of policing impacts of the H2OI unsanctioned car rally held the weekend of September 24th to 26th, 2021 in the town of Wasaga Beach. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councilor Belanger, Councilor Watson. I will call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. That's moved 7-0 unanimously. At this time, Council, I don't see anything else pulled. And I will turn the chair over to Councillor Watson for Public Works, please.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. Due to the length of the community service and there's been a request for a break, we will reconvene at 11:15. That's okay for the Public Works section at that time. Thank you.
And we're live, Chair Watson.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. Welcome back, everyone. We are now in the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee. We have no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings today. We do have 3 items under unfinished business, of which 2 of them are on today's agenda, 4.2.2 and 4.2.3. We have no other agency reports at this time. We are now in the consent agenda, and I see only one report has been pulled at this point, which is 4.5.1 from Councillor Belanger. So we will deal with that separately. At this point, I will read the motion and ask for first and seconder on this. Resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 18th, 2021 consent agenda items 4.4 to 4.6, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. May I have a mover of that, please? Councillor Wells, seconder, Deputy Mayor Bray. There's no discussion on that. Those in favor? That is passed unanimously. At this point, we will now go to 4.5.1, and this is the area residence petition dated October 2021 regarding George Avenue, Maryland Avenue South, and Robert Street. So we will now go to Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair Watson. Yes, I had felt that the residents had done a very extensive deputation related to this, and I fully understand that the problem might be initiated from MTO lands that are not within the control of the municipality. With that said, I was not aware of the extent that these residents were being impacted. I believe there were 50 residents that were involved in the petition. And, you know, to be flooded out in 10 consecutive years, but 4 times over the last 18 months, I think it's sort of testament to how weather events are changing, even in our region, and we're seeing it, you know, across Canada and the US. But my concern is that if we cannot get to the root solution of this problem, is there any temporary measures that the municipality can support, whether it's, you know, sandbagging or whatever else could potentially protect some of these properties? I'm certainly not familiar with the flows in that area or what is possible. But I don't want to see us pointing the finger at the provincial government and allowing residents of our community to continually be negative impacted into the future. I'd really like to refer this back to staff, and in the event that we cannot find resolution with the MTO, that we can look at what temporary measures might be put in place by the town to assist these residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments to Councillor Belanger's? I see nothing. Oh, Deputy Mayor Bray. Oh.
Sorry, wrong card. Just perhaps if the director could speak, because in the report there were a number of kind of proactive steps that Public Works was willing to take, cleaning out ditches, potentially looking at relocating the mailboxes. So I think the report kind of summarizes what we can do at this point without incurring, you know, incredible costs that truly aren't ours to probably be responsible for.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To the Director of Public Works, Kevin.
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Chair Watson, to Deputy Mayor Bray.
Yeah, there are certainly limitations with what we can do, recognizing when the ditches full downstream, that's our restriction. So we have multiple areas throughout the community that suffers from some form of flood damage, and we make sandbags available and the sand available for them to come to Public Works, and we supply that for free for them to fill and take some sandbags back with them, and that certainly is available for these residents as well. We haven't gone through the list of individuals who have signed the petition just to confirm who truly is impacted by the flooding, or are they just supporting the petition because of the obvious challenges downstream at the bottom end of Maryland. There were some on George Avenue that also signed the petition, and we're still trying to understand, the scope of those signatures. So certainly we recognize there's challenges at the bottom end of Robert Street due to some manipulation and changing of the grades and behind properties at the top end, but we also recognize there's some flooding at the bottom end of Maryland. As indicated in my report, we will continue to monitor the municipal facilities for obstructions and respond accordingly. We'll continue to apply pressure with the province to do the same with their area maintenance contractor. We can look to speak to Canada Post in terms of relocating the mailbox so it isn't in conflict with the flooding during those periods of time. But there's limited opportunities for us to do anything, with the exception again of potentially supplying those sandbags for them to protect their property and certainly those low-lying lands that are in some cases lower than the ditch.
Is there anything further? Anyone at this point? Seeing none, I will read the motion that's before us. Resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the staff report in response to the petition presented to Council on October 26, 2021 regarding area drainage concerns, and further that the drainage study for the subject area be advanced in the capital works forecast and included in 2022 budget deliberations. May I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Belanger, seconder Councillor Kinney. Those in favor? And that is carried 7-0, unanimous. Thank you for that. And that, I believe, brings an end to the Public Works section of this agenda. Thank you, everyone.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm on the laptop. It tends to phase out, so I'll do this quickly. Welcome to Development Services section of the Coordinated Committee. I will point out, looking at it, the deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. On the agenda that I had, it shows an item 5.1.1. That is erroneous. It has been pulled, so I believe that it's oh, can you not see me? Hold on. There we go. Sorry. There you go. Hi. Thank you, Dina. Anyway, that 5.1.1 was put in erroneously, so there's nothing there. If we look at 5.2 unfinished business, there's a few items in there that will be addressed at some point. There's no other agency reports. Under the consent agenda, the only item I know that has been pulled is 5.5.8, which is the building report, I believe. I don't think there's any others. If there is, please let me know at this time. Seeing none, I will go to the consent agenda resolution, which reads as follows. Resolved that the Development Services section of the Coordinating Committee hereby receives the November 18th, 2021 consent agenda items 5.4 through 5.6, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. And I've already noted that one. So I will ask for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kinney and Deputy Mayor Bray, thank you. And all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And we will then slide down to 5.5.8, which is the Building Department Activity Summary, or a good news report, I think. It was pulled by Councillor Watson, so I will let him speak to the item before I call the question. George, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Yes, this is a very good news report, and I'm not going to highlight everything, but I do note from our Director of Building about non-residential development in town this year, which is essentially your commercial development mostly, that we're now at over $70 million for the year, which surpasses our previous record by $52 million in value this year alone. And we have now broken through the $200 million value in construction value of $209 million. And what this means, I think, to our municipality is that there's a lot of confidence being shown in this council, especially during a pandemic. It's borne out by the construction and development we are seeing from east to west. Our construction value, as I've noted, has blown the roof off and set new records in every category. To me, this translates into jobs with new commercial buildings going up. It also translates into homes and new people settling into our beautiful town. And with this confidence in our council, the new commercial construction helps to widen and strengthen and balance our tax base. New home construction allows us to grow in population, which will translate into our long-awaited high school. For without growth, a town is stagnant. We have a high school site, and we are now on the capital list for schools to be built. Third step is to have the numbers to fully support the high school, and I believe this is going to be achievable in the near future with the growth that we're seeing in this community, both residentially and commercial. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, George. Again, I was going to point out a similar thing. I wasn't necessarily going to credit council with all of it, but we have a whole bunch of reasons to come to Wasaga to live and to work. And, you know, we can't discount the attraction of the water, the price of housing, staff, and you know, our whole community. So anyway, thank you for your comments. I will ask if there's anyone else who has a comment. Seeing none, I will call the question, please. That Development Service section of the Coordinating Committee receives the staff report, Building Department Activity Summary, October 2021 for information. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Wells, and all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And with that, we have come to the end of the Development Services section, so I'll turn it over to the Deputy Mayor to deal with the General Government section. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. So we will now commence the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee. Today there are no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings. First thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. At this point, there is one item that I am aware of that has been pulled. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. It is 6.5.3. Sorry, there. My way through. And then 6.6.5, which has been pulled by myself due to a conflict of interest. So I will be passing the chair to Councillor Wells at that section of the agenda. So seeing nothing else attempting to be pulled, I will read the motion for the consent agenda. Resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 18th, 2021 consent agenda, items 6.4 through to 6.6, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding all items pulled from the motion, which will be voted on separately. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Kinney, Councillor Watson, all in favor? And that passes 7-0 unanimously. So then we could jump to item 6. Sorry, I stapled my pages, so they're hard to flip. 6.5.3, Director of Legislative Services and Clerk's report, re-committee and council meetings, transition to a hybrid meeting structure. And I believe this was pulled by Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. Yes, I pulled this item. I have a number of comments on it. Certainly I'm in agreement that the safety of our staff, our council, and our residents is paramount. But the report indicates that we continue to exclude the public until such time as all social distancing and mask requirements are removed by the province, which I believe is somewhat extreme. Like certainly we could be in a masking situation for a long period of time. I think everyone's aware that we can now go into restaurants and we can remove our masks and have dinner with friends. And so I think that the current situation allows for a little flexibility. I would suggest that as soon as a neighboring municipality were to make the move to in-person meetings, that we would consider that. The other thing is that I believe that anyone registering to make comment or question at a council meeting should be allowed to attend in person. That's usually a very small number of people, and I think people are much more comfortable rather than the technology to stand before council and to make their comments, and that would be a recommendation I make. And my final recommendation is I don't agree with the 2 o'clock start time. Once per month, working people that work 9 to 5 need an opportunity to participate and to address council and to hear council. And I don't believe that's supported by a 2 p.m. start time. I think we need to have our council meetings in the evening, as we always have, for that very reason, to ensure that all members of the public are in a position that they can attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I would just like to say I do support the clerk's report. I think a lot of effort went into it, a lot of research. I believe Dr. Gardner provided further updates yesterday, and maybe we can ask Dina to speak to that, just in case the public hasn't heard recommendations coming out of there. We have some municipalities, such as our neighbors over in Collingwood, who have just said there will be no meetings until the next term of council. So I think throughout this pandemic, we have shown caution, but to move the municipality forward. And I agree with what Dina is proposing, and she's basing it on recommendations from Dr. Gardner. So could Dina maybe speak to that?
Absolutely, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through your worship. The letter from Dr. Gardner is very specific in what he recommends regarding in-person meetings with or without the public in attendance. And it's just a matter of what is required if the public is allowed to come into the council chambers, which requires additional staff, that masks are worn by all of council members at all times, screening, and limiting the number of members that can join. So my recommendation is based on what Dr. Gardner is saying, that it's not safe at this point to allow gatherings in meetings without those precautions put in place, and that it would cost or allow the municipality would have to put different measures in place in order for that to happen.
Thank you. Mayor Byfolchi?
Thank you. If Dina could also just reiterate for the public who maybe haven't read the report, the cost savings to moving these meetings during the day, as well as I think we all struggled a little bit in the beginning with COVID and going to Zoom meetings and things like that. But we've also seen some benefit to that anybody at any time of day really could join a meeting if they wanted to. So Dina, can you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. Through COVID, and I just want to also mention perhaps that having meetings at night doesn't mean all people can attend. There are a number of people in the public that work shift work. There are a number that have to deal with childcare in the evening, and some find it quite cumbersome to come in the evening as well. So I think whatever time our meetings are, not everybody will be allowed will be able to join. But I do think that when members of the public have a certain issue that they want to discuss, that they do make the time, whatever time the meeting is. Particularly during COVID, with adding the electronic meeting feature, it has been quite easy for members to join our public meetings. We've had so many people in the community that have never used Zoom before, and we've walked them through it. We have mock meetings for them so that they can join and learn the process, and it's been quite successful, and they're quite satisfied with the way we're allowing them to engage. So I think it's worked out really well for them to have that ability, which we're hoping to continue permanently, to allow people from any walk of life or any schedule to be able to attend our meetings to discuss what they need to.
And sorry, just the dollar amount. Did you touch on that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies. So we did look at our payroll costs only at this point. So it's a very conservative estimate, and it's about $80,000 a year for staff to attend public or meetings in the evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, I saw Councillor Belanger. I also have Councillor Watson and Councillor Foster on the list wishing to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair Foster, I believe. Anyhow, two of the suggestions, again, and I wasn't advocating that we go to full-blown public meetings. Usually there's 2 or 3 people that comment. In other meetings, we're talking about one plexiglass screen that they stand behind, and certainly the social distancing within the council chambers for 3 people. It's not a great expense, and I think it should be a consideration. As far as some people not being available to attend at night, all of our meetings are during the day, so they certainly can attend coordinated committee. They could attend committee of the whole meetings. This is one meeting a month where people that work full time, many of which cannot say to their bosses, hey, it's 2 o'clock. Can I go into the lunchroom and hook up my computer and attend a council meeting? That's not practical. And certainly there's a lot more people working full time that are being excluded than there would be people that couldn't attend any meetings during the day. So we had our meetings at 7 o'clock once a month, council meetings, where we summarize and confirm all of our decisions throughout the month. And I think it's extremely important to be inclusive of all of our residents. And I would not support not having an evening meeting of council. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I correct in for the last while or during COVID, we've been having our council meetings at 9 a.m. mostly, except for county council days, I think, where we've moved it till 2.
That's correct.
That's correct. And that's been going on now for a year and a half, maybe, something like that. So I think it's, I personally have not received any calls or questions about that process, but we've been doing it. We're moving it to maybe a little more reasonable time at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. So I think it's there. And I think if anyone has and there's a lot more people working from home now also that would be available. They don't have to ask their boss necessarily. They just need, if it's important enough for them to attend and speak to it, I think they can they can do that also. So I'm supportive of the resolution that's going forward at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Foster.
Okay, first I'm going to wear a name tag next week so they get me right. Again, I look at the report, and I'm going to support it as is. But when we look, the pandemic created a whole different paradigm for how business is conducted around the world, including ourselves. And so people may be uncomfortable with the technology, but from a strict point of accessibility, this does open it up to anybody to be able to attend. And if they don't have access to a computer, I get that. But there are public, you know, the library, for example, has they can borrow a hotspot and an iPad actually. So I also look and I go, you know, fundamentally how society is dealing with meetings has changed. And as pointed out by somebody, I think it was the mayor herself, was saying, you know, there are, and I don't have young kids anymore, but in the evenings there was guides and there was hockey and there's figure skating and there's soccer and all those kind of things. So people have, no matter what time we pick of a day, there will be people who can't physically attend. And even, you know, they won't be able to attend online from time to time. But my experience has been when there is an item that someone wants to speak to that's impacting themselves and they want to present, they will go to their employer and say, I need to be off between 2 and 3 or whatever it is, because the issue is important to them. And it's a similar thing to, you know, when someone wants to see a lawyer, they tend to, you know, or a doctor, they tend to take the time off to do it because it's important to them. And so I also want to put a personal thing here, because when we started this, going to virtual, I was sick and could not, I had zero immune system. I could not attend meetings. And because we didn't have a hybrid system set up, I had to miss meetings and certainly in-camera meetings because we didn't have the facility to do that. Now it allows all of council to be involved pretty well anytime and anywhere in the world that to a meeting, and it allows the public to do it. We also have started, you know, there's the streaming going on. The people have the ability to look at it. If they're coming to a council meeting, unless they've signed up to speak at the question and comment period, there isn't a chance for them to interact. So, you know, people, whether they comment this way or they comment in person at the council table, it still gives them a voice. And again, question and comment period isn't really a debate session. It's a chance for people to talk and tell, you know, to do that. And it's always been there. It's never gone away from, you know, whether we were in camera or in person, we allowed people to sign up for that, and they still will. So I will support it at the time for, you know, all those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I had a question for the clerk. So if we go to a hybrid format, does that mean that members of council have to be in person? Or if they're out of town for, you know, a reasonably valid reason, can they attend virtually? And will their vote then count? Because I know at one point it didn't.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. My recommendation would be that we amend the procedural bylaw to allow some participation in certain circumstances. And I would bring back some wording with the procedural bylaw that would add a line that would allow for members of council to just have their approval through the mayor to attend virtually and give me 24 hours notice. And that's all we would require. But I think that hybrid, the intention is that most members would be in person most of the time, if not all. And then if there are instances where a member couldn't attend because they're out of province, or it conflicts with something else, or they're ill, or you know, life happens, then those things would be just through the mayor, and we would deal with it that way.
Thank you. I'm fully supportive of that. I think moving forward, society is changing a little bit. Whereas we used to wake up with, you know, cold symptoms or a stifly nose, we would take our Advil, cold and sinus, and we would get up and go to work because we were strong and we were we were needed. Whereas now I think that this, if we can keep those germs at home and limit the spread of all illness, it's not a bad thing. So I think a hybrid model for the world is probably a great step forward. So thank you. I saw Councillor Watson's card.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Foster was a great example of it a couple meetings ago. He was out on the West Coast. He participated in the meeting. He voted. He did everything that we, sitting at a chair in the council chambers could do too. So I'm happy to hear the clerk say that she can do a little amendment to that. But I think it is important. And the numbers, quite frankly, are going the wrong way for us now. There's 711 cases today, which is very high. And
You hit your mute, Councillor Watson.
I just say we may be stuck a little longer than we want to be in this situation with the numbers going the wrong way. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the future is still a little unknown, so I'm glad to see that there's some flexibility in this. So seeing no more comments, I'm going to read the motion. That the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that the Council Chambers upgrade be completed by ME Audio and Visual for $72,259.76 plus HST, funded 75% through the COVID Grant Reserve and 25% through Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. And that Council return to in-person meetings with no public attendance following the completion of the audio upgrades to the Council Chambers. And that Council return to in-person meetings, including public attendance on a date following that which the province lifts all restrictions for physical distancing, face coverings, COVID-19 screening protocols, and proof of vaccination, and following the recommendations of the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit. And that regular council meetings be held generally on the fourth Thursday of the month at 2:00 p.m. commencing in January 2022. And finally, the procedural bylaw amendments be adopted to reflect these changes. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Foster, all in favor? Opposed, if any? So that motion carries 6-1 with Councillor Belanger in opposition. I would like to pass the chair over to Councillor Wells, as I have declared pecuniary interest, the departmental accounts, which is 6.6.5.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will read the motion. It is with respect to the departmental accounts. It's resolved that the September 1 to 30, 2021 and October 1 to 31, 2021 accounts, as reviewed by General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee, are hereby confirmed. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Kinney and Mayor Byfolchi. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And with that, I get kicked out again, and it's back to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Short but sweet. The next session of our meeting will move in camera. There's probably no need for a break at this point. We haven't been sitting too long. Okay, so resolve that pursuant to section 239(2) AI.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Bray, there is a COVID update.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that. I apologize. Item 6.7, the CAO's verbal update of COVID-19. Mr. CAO, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just about to jump in there, so thank you to the Deputy Clerk for jumping in for me. So today I'm joined by our Communications Officer, Mike Jennings, who's going to provide the provincial update. And I'm going to speak on behalf of our Deputy Chief today because he's away at a training course, and I'll provide a command team update as well.
Thank you, George. I have 5 items that I want to share with the committee today relating to the province. The first one is November the 10th, the province said it is pausing the lifting of capacity limits and remaining higher risk settings as outlined in a plan to safely reopen Ontario. This is being done out of an abundance of caution as the province monitors public health trends. November 16th, the province said that pharmacies will soon have the option to offer COVID testing to symptomatic people. It's not clear yet when this will roll out or if local pharmacies will participate. The same day, Premier Ford said his government will let regions take the lead on tougher pandemic measures for now. The Premier says the local approach makes sense because the risk is lower than in previous infection waves now that more people are vaccinated. November 17th, Ontario's top doctor said he expects that children aged 5 to 11 will be receiving their first COVID-19 vaccines by the end of November, and we expect more details about this in the weeks ahead. And November 17th as well, Ontario reported 128 new COVID-19 cases tied to public schools. This is the highest single-day tally recorded in more than a month. The Ministry of Education says 110 of the cases were detected in students and 16 involved staff, while the affiliation of 2 other cases were not disclosed. And that concludes my report to committee.
Thank you. Back to Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to provide the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit update first, and then I'll get into the command team update. So in Simcoe County, there were 322 new cases reported to the health unit last week. That's a 33% increase over the cases reported for the week of October 31st. There are currently 19 individuals hospitalized in Simcoe County. The 7-day moving average of the new COVID-19 cases in Simcoe County is 56.7 cases per day. The percentage positivity rate in Simcoe Muskoka is 3.3%, which is high. There are now 18 active outbreaks in the region, including 2 institutions, 2 congregate living settings, 3 community, and 11 education settings. 87% of the people over 12 years old in Simcoe County are fully vaccinated or partially vaccinated, which is close to the provincial rate of 89%. In Wasaga Beach has a total of 340 cases since the beginning of the pandemic. This number currently includes 2 in hospital, 13 isolating in the community, 5 deaths, and 320 recoveries. 23 of the cases were listed during the last 14 days, with the most recent case occurring on November 16th. Finally, in Wasaga Beach, 88% of residents over 12 years old are fully or partially vaccinated. Dr. Garner announced earlier this week that he will be issuing 2 new letters of instruction. The one that impacts municipalities is the requirement for all youth aged 12 to 17 years old to provide proof of vaccine when participating in sports outside of school. This will add an extra requirement at the entrance of the arena and for some activities at the RecPlex. We have not yet received the letter, but Dr. Garner did indicate that this rule will not be in effect for several weeks, as the health unit has chosen a deadline that will allow time for youth who are not vaccinated to become fully immunized by the start date. Town staff work with the health unit on reestablishing the vaccination clinic at the RecPlex, this time in the Oakview room. The first was held this past Tuesday of this week, and I'm told it was very busy. For November until the end of January, clinics will be held on Tuesdays and Fridays, alternating between an evening clinic and a daytime clinic. In late December, the United Church in Wasaga Beach is hosting 2 clinics. The clinics are currently for booster shots for eligible people. We are waiting for information on the plan for children 5 to 11 years of age. The health unit is expecting approval by Health Canada and the province very shortly. I'll pause, Madam Chair, see if there's any questions on the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit update. Seeing none, Madam Chair, I'll just carry on. The command team continues to monitor the situation at town facilities, but has not had a reason to meet in the last 2 weeks. The Silver Stick hockey tournament starts this weekend and runs for the next 4 weeks. It's great to see this long-running tournament back in Wasaga Beach. Staff, along with Wasaga Beach Minor Hockey and Silver Stick volunteers, have developed protocols for vaccination screening. Volunteers are working closely with staff to ensure the safety protocols are adhered to. Staff and the volunteers will be using this weekend to work out any kinks and have them in place for the following 3 weeks. In closing, Madam Chair, although case numbers are rising across the province, the best defense, in addition to being vaccinated, continues to be wearing a mask indoors. I'd just like to encourage people to continue to wear their masks when in indoor situations where it is required. Thank you. That concludes my comments, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the CAO? Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the CAO, I heard the United Church is doing a couple clinics, and were they specifically for the booster shots in December? Is that what I heard? Because that's fairly important for a lot of people. They're all wanting to get the booster, or a lot of people are. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. At this point, they are for the booster, but as I indicated, we're waiting word from the province and Health Canada with respect to vaccinations for younger folks. And I'm not sure at this point, councillor, whether the 2 clinics at the United Church at the end of the month will just be for boosters. Right now, they are intended to be for boosters, but will also children be offered the opportunity as well. At this point in time, they are for boosters only.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will read the motion that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee received the November 18th, 2021 verbal COVID-19 update from the CAO for information. I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Watson, all in favor? And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So now we will try this again. The next section of our meeting will move into closed session. So resolved that pursuant to section 239(2)(a), I, and K of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the November 18th Coordinated Committee meeting will move into closed session to discuss the security of the property of the municipality or local board, trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Wells, all in favor? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, if you could advise when we are in closed session, we will continue. Thank you.
And Deputy Mayor Bray, we're ready.
Thank you. So welcome back. We have returned from a brief closed session discussion, and we'll continue on with the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee. So the first motion, 8.1, would be resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee confirm the direction provided to the CAO in closed session pertaining to a lease matter. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Wells, all in favor? That motion carries unanimously. Item 8.2, resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee confirmed the direction provided to the Director of Recreation Events and Facilities in closed session pertaining to a financial agreement matter. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Kinney, Mayor Byfolchi. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. And then finally, 8.3, that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee receive the external board meeting minutes of September 30th, 2021, provided in closed session for information. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Foster, Councillor Kinney, all in favor? That motion carries unanimously. And then we move on to section 9.1. A beachfront lease for 31 Beach Drive, Unit B. And the motion is that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it approve a lease for 31 Beach Drive, Unit B, with Canada Zio Mai Feng Incorporated from December 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Foster, any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. And with that, the next item on our agenda is the adjournment. Thank you very much, everybody, for a very productive meeting this morning. Have a great day.